According to legend, silk originated in ancient China. At around 3000 BC, Lady Shi Lingxi, wife of the mythical Yellow Emperor, was said to have introduced silkworm and the use of the loom to create what was then a very luxurious fabric. This video discusses more into the Silk Road and its effects on ancient China, as well as all Western civilization at that time.
The Silk Road was the world's first international commercial highway. It connected two of the world's greatest empires: the producer of silk, China, and the consumer of silk, the Romans.
It was a vast network of trading that goes across Central Asia into India and China.
The Silk Road really didn't exist with markers and milestones as much as it was commercial trading routes.
We call it the Silk Route because of silk being one of the major commodities, but many other commodities were traveling as well.
Chinese silk was the finest fabric in the ancient world.
Silk manufacturing is a state secret in China. No Chinese weaver is to share that knowledge with a foreigner. And so this was something the Europeans couldn't produce. And so when they discover silk, they're enraptured. This is the substance they want. And the ruling class back in Rome clamor to be able to dress in silk. If you've lived your life wearing nothing but sackcloth and wool, to be able to put on a silk garment is just the most extraordinary experience.
Some of silk's attraction, I think, is its very rarity. There were not many people who could afford something imported from that distance.
If you're packing these on the backs of mules and camels, it's a very slow and expensive process. You need high value per volume, and this is what spices, gems, and silks are. They are very high value goods in terms of their weight.
The fascinating thing about China and Rome is that you have these two huge empires that traded with each other, but probably not directly. We do have some fascinating glimpses of accounts in China of Romans making it that far away. I think it's always amazing how much the luxury goods of the capital, or even the fads and fashions, generated this adventurous travel to unknown portions of the globe. And that whole world was in some ways united by this interaction between these very distant cultures.
For more than 2,000 years, the Chinese had kept the production of this fabric secret, even putting those that endanger its secrecy with death. At first, only the royalty was using it, but as time passed by, it was put into more general use. Paper is indisputably one of the most important inventions of mankind. It is used to record happenings, events, and even ideas through either writing or drawing. These were done on different media: stone tablets, clay tablets, papyrus, and then paper. At first, there was papyrus, from which the term paper was derived. This is different from the paper we know today, a mat of fibers pressed together and dried to make a flat sheet. The ancient Chinese were the first ones recorded to have invented the process of paper making, way back in 105 AD during the Han Dynasty. Both paper and paper making was introduced by a courtier named Cai Lun to the Chinese emperor, and this was noted in the imperial court records. Some dispute that papermaking was already existent even before this, but he made way for this technology to spread.
Villagers here in Jinhua earn their living by making paper the traditional way, sheet by sheet. Gathering the material they use to make paper is as simple as going into the backyard. The villagers use bamboo, which grows in abundance on these mountainsides. They say it only takes about 1 year for it to grow to this height. Workers cut the bamboo down, dry it, and chop it into chips. Then they steam the chips until they're crumbly and moist. Next, the bamboo is soaked in bleach and ground into a thick mush. Once the mush is white, they grind it again into liquid pulp, perfect for paper. 3 centuries ago, the process took 100 days. Now, it takes a week. Once they've suspended the pulp in a vat of water, they use screens to gather a thin layer and then lay the new paper out to drain with one sweeping, elegant motion. This family has been making paper here for 14 generations, nearly 300 years. It's a technique that takes a long time to master.
From China, paper making soon spread to other countries in the East, such as Korea. Here, pulp was prepared from the fibers of hemp, rattan, mulberry, bamboo, rice straw, and seaweed. A Korean monk named Nonsho then brought the practice to Japan by sharing his knowledge at the imperial palace around 610 AD. At first, the Japanese used paper only for official matters. However, alongside the spread of Buddhism, its demand soon grew rapidly. Its spread reached Tibet, and soon to Central Asia and Persia, from which it was introduced to India through trade. Compass is a tool used to help aid in finding direction. We may be surprised to learn that the first compass was invented to help practitioners tap into the source of the Earth's power and to align with it. Originally known as the Chinese magic spoon, this handy gadget dates back to the Han Dynasty of ancient China around 206 BC. The first compass was called Sinan, which means commanding the south.
We're especially fascinated with the most mysterious invisible force of all: magnetism. The result of their fascination was the creation of the world's first magnetic compass. This was called a Sinon, a section of lodestone, which is naturally magnetic, was carved into the shape of the Big Dipper and placed on a polished board. The circular center of the board represented heaven, and the square represented earth, and the spoon the Big Dipper. This constellation was especially sacred, as 2 stars in the Big Dipper always point to the pole star. The Emperor was the earthly counterpart of the pole star, around which all the other stars rotated. The master himself, Confucius, said, "He who governs virtuously may be compared to the polar star, which keeps its place as the other stars turn around it." All visitors to the emperor had to sit to his south, so that the stars could rotate around his head. Therefore, officials around the emperor were seen as inhabiting the constellations rotating around the polar star. And so the Sinon was a mystical instrument used not for navigation, but as a tool for geomancy, or feng shui. Feng shui is a technique for aligning cities and houses harmoniously with the Earth's forces. Forces detected with the aid of this compass. The Sinaunang evolved into more complex feng shui compasses, which are still in use today. Hundreds of years before the first compass was to be found on a European ship, small factories in China mass-produced a variety of compass designs. The world's first prototype of the dry modern navigational compass was called the magnetic turtle. South was indicated by the direction of the needle, which was attached to a magnet concealed inside the model. Around the year 850 AD, Chinese ships began to carry a water compass to help them navigate during murky weather and storms, when there was no way to use the sun or the stars. This simple mariner's compass would always point south, unlike modern compasses today.
The first compass was developed in order to help with the feng shui practice. The ancient Chinese used the compass to help direct them towards a life of balance and oneness with the earth. It would be years later that the compass would be redeveloped for use in finding direction. With the inventions of paper and ink, stamper gradually became popular during the Qin dynasty, which lasted from 265 to 420 AD. This was the early form of carved type printing. Block printing first appeared in the Tang dynasty, which lasted from 618 to 907 AD. The text was first written on a piece of thin paper, then glued face down onto a wooden plate. The characters were carved out to make a woodblock printing plate, which was used to print the text.
First methods of print, a simple process which revolutionized the intellectual world.
What we're seeing here is the process of printing from a woodcut. Now, all a woodcut is a piece of wood with the image you want carved in reverse. You take ink, apply it to the wood, put on your piece of paper, apply pressure, and you have a printed image.
Having come up with the woodcut, the Chinese then ran with the idea. They made small woodcuts with individual characters inscribed on the back. They had invented, in other words, movable type. It was another critical invention that arose during the Song dynasty. But the reason movable type didn't take off in China was that instead of using a few dozen letters, they used thousands of characters, each one representing a different word. This obstacle limited the use of movable type, but printing continued. It was in China that the information age truly began.
Block printing was a costly and time-consuming process. In the Song dynasty, which lasted from 960 to 1279 AD, a man named Li Shi carved individual characters on identical pieces of fine clay. Each piece of characters could be assembled to print a page and then broken up and redistributed as needed. By the year 1000, paged books in the modern style had replaced scrolls. Two-colored printing, black and red, was seen as early as 1340. This technology then spread to Korea, Japan, Vietnam, and Europe. Later, German Johann Gutenberg invented movable type made of metal in the 1440s. Movable type printing developed very fast. Based on clay type made of wood, lead, tin, and copper gradually appeared. Gunpowder was first discovered in China. Around 850 AD, during the Tang dynasty, an alchemist mixed 75 parts saltpeter, 15 parts charcoal, and 10 parts sulfur to form what we know now as gunpowder. In this video, We will see how the invention of gunpowder changed the world at that time, and how it affected and will affect our future.
Gunpowder certainly has to be ranked among the most important inventions of man.
Gunpowder was first discovered by Chinese alchemists who were looking for the elixir of life. And they found that this combination of charcoal and saltpeter and sulfur burned very fast. If you put that into a sealed, confined space, then you get expanding gases. So something has to give. You get a bang as the thing explodes.
The first use of this observation is, well, gee, that would be great to celebrate the emperor's birthday with.
Gunpowder at first, it's just a thing that goes boom. You know, they learn to make it into fireworks.
And so gunpowder starts off as a toy.
Guns took a long time to develop from that first flash of gunpowder. Certainly by the 1200s, they're using what they call the fire lance. Like a lance, it looks like a stick, but it's actually a hollow bamboo tube with gunpowder in the end. And initially, that would just spew out flame. But it's also reckoned that around that time, they were putting projectiles in there.
Gunpowder spurred a complete arms race that ultimately led to building massive cannons that could batter away at the walls of fortresses.
This begins to move to the West. It changes how humans relate to one another. It changes how kingdoms are built, how kingdoms are torn down. It changes colonization. It changes how we subject people who don't have it.
We, as a species, had so much fear and created so much mythology around the concept of thunder and lightning. In the gun, you have brought that kind of fear, that kind of primal fear, and placed it in the hands of an individual.
In this entire process, we are increasing the lethality of warfare. The individual soldier is becoming more and more powerful, more and more deadly.
As soon as somebody develops a weapon, somebody else develops a defense against that weapon. And this is the self-perpetuating arms race that we're still caught up in.
There's really no part of our human experience since the development of gunpowder that hasn't been influenced by its presence.
Unlike what most history books state, the Chinese military started using gunpowder for military purposes as early as 904 AD, or about 50 years after its invention. Its first use being in Chinese fire arrows, which were deadly and terrifying for their enemies during that time.